Hi everyone, my name is Clara Prensky and today I'll be presenting on the influence of rock and roll music inside communist Czechoslovakia and how it led to the fall of the communist regime. Some main points I'm going to cover in this presentation will be the Czech rock band, the Plastic People of the Universe, how their arrests led to human rights movement, and how that movement brought democracy to the nation. Some historical background information before I begin. Czechoslovakia was a country in Central Europe and part of the Iron Curtain territories of the Soviet Union. I say was because it is no longer a current nation, but split into two, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Czechoslovakia was a democratic nation well before the communist overthrow in 1948. The first official democracy was recorded in 1918, and it was happily welcomed by the Czechs and Slovaks. However, the country of Czechoslovakia was not always unified. Over the course of 154 years, the Czech Republic and Slovak Federation were united and separated 4 times. They were independent of each other and autonomous while living under the rule of the Habsburg Empire, and were unified in 1918 when the empire fell. The Nazis invaded in 1938, and they were forced to separate into the Czech Republic, which was then known as the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, and Slovakia. In 1948, they were unified for the last time under the communist regime of the Soviet Union. The citizens of communist Czechoslovakia desired to be under a democratic nation once again. In fact, in January 1968, the president of Czechoslovakia attempted to liberalize the nation by passing certain laws to ease the restrictions they were under, which began the era of the Prague Spring. From January to August of 1968, President Alexander Dubček enacted his action program in an attempt to liberalize Czech society with economic and political reforms after years of oppression. These reforms ended censorship of the media and press, allowed personal travel to extend past Iron Curtain boundaries, and allowed students and academics to speak freely without fear of arrest. Czech soon saw a rise of artistic expression, musical revival, and free speech. His attempt to liberalize the nation, however, was quickly met with violence and tanks from the Soviet army only 8 months after the launch of the program. The Soviet Union issued an era of normalization, the attempts to return to communist normalcy, and all attempts to liberalize were shut down. An underground rock scene emerged in Prague in the late 1960s, but before the introduction of the Prague Spring. It challenged the party's monopoly over culture and art and their efforts to control youth culture. In the late 1960s to early 1970s, young musicians that were fired by the raw energy from the normalization process grabbed guitars, dodged the police, and manically pounded out covers of Western hits. Many who made up the underground movement were enthusiasts of Western rock bands, such as the Beatles, Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa, most notably the Velvet Underground. John Lennon's death in 1980 arguably had more of an impact in Czechoslovakia than it did in the West. In Prague, there is an entire wall dedicated to John Lennon, Lennon's Wall, where artists are free and are encouraged to paint their images and spread graffiti on the wall for all to see. The image here shows the Lennon Wall, covered with paint and graffiti. It may not look like this for the rest of the day, or even the next day, as more and more artists will continue to paint over this graffiti with their own work of art. Rock music first began to gather power in the early to mid-1970s. The effect of normalization dampened the spirits of the Czechoslovaks so bad, no one ever suspected this course of musical rebellion to emerge, and quite frankly, it's sensational that it did. Czechs began to form their own music groups and bands, starting in the underground and slowly making their way out to the public. The party denounced rock music and the musicians, claiming they insinuated a consumer style of life, bureaucratic stupidity, and hypocritical morality, just to name a few examples. The president claimed that Western-style music also promoted an irresponsible illusion to the youth. However, even with the state police having been ordered to arrest any person or band that stepped out of the musical boundaries, rock groups and singers continued to perform their music. The Plastic People of the Universe, or more commonly referred to as the Plastic People, became the most popular band of the Czech underground music movement. They were also the most targeted band by the state police. Their music was inspired by Western rock and roll bands, specifically Lou Reed and his band, the Velvet Underground. The Plastic People were far more than a symbolic representation for freedom of expression. They were the rock band every student, activist, and liberal looked up to as they resisted pressure from the authorities to de-Americanize and de-liberalize their names and repertoire. The Plastic People were loved by the people but hated by the government, as most rock bands were. Their albums could not be officially released and distributed under the former communist regime in Czechoslovakia. Instead, fans would duplicate tapes with one another, which often resulted in poor technical quality of the tape itself. Their most popular album is Egon Bondi's Happy Hearts Club Band, which is a parody of the Beatles' album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. The songs that were written for this particular album were inspired by the settings and words of Egon Bondy, a Czech philosopher and one of the leading personalities of the Czech underground movement. I'm going to play one of their songs from this album. It is called Magic Night. March of 1976, authorities arrested the band members and they were found guilty of creating public disturbances and singing indecent songs. A witness to their trial remembers, "The trial was shameful. The party actually did not allow the defendants to present their arguments. The evidence was always doubtful and rather made up by some witness. And the witnesses, all those that would testify for the defense, were not called." With the trial and imprisonment of the Plastic People, it sparked national outrage and a desire to act upon the suppression and human rights violations that the party enacted. Their trial and imprisonment led to the creation of Charter 77. Charter 77 is the longest-running human rights document and organization in Communist Europe. Introduced January 10, 1977, hence the name of the charter, it aimed to define human rights inside Czechoslovakia. Over its 13-year history, Charter 77 went on to issue nearly 600 documents and reports on the violations of human rights inside Czechoslovakia. While the charter was an actual physical document, it is also an organization with representatives and public figures. There were spokespeople elected to represent the charter, and the signatories of the charter stood by any means to establish human rights inside Czechoslovakia. Many of the signatories were members of the underground music and political movements, attempting to liberalize the communist society. Among the first of the representatives was Václav Havel, known famously as a playwright, poet, and author, and then the future democratic president of Czechoslovakia. Of the original 242 signatories of the charter, 200 of them had been questioned by the party police. The charter was drawing more and more attention from the citizens, and the party was not happy about that. Unsurprisingly, the charter saw outside support from Western countries with democracies that were well established. It saw support from countries such as Austria, France, West Germany, Great Britain, the Scandinavian countries, and of course the United States. It also saw support from solidarity groups, including American radio channel Voice of America and European channel Radio Free Europe, which helped spread information about the charter inside Czechoslovakia to those who did not have insight to the underground movement. Many students and activists helped spread the information about the charter to Czechs who were not able to collect this information from secret societies, the radios, or underground groups. Students played a key role in helping the charter succeed. Young people were an inspiration to the creators of the charter, and they even dedicated a document to the students. They warned the authorities that depriving young people of the music, fashion, and activities of their choice will only lead to feelings of frustration, hopelessness, and emptiness, which in return will give them the strength to release their tensions upon the society. Students who wanted to hold demonstrations and protest the controversial laws and repressions that they were placed under. They organized the most significant of these demonstrations in 1989. 1989 was a huge year for Czechoslovakia and the Charter. On November 17, 1989, an officially approved demonstration commemorating the Nazi destruction of Czech universities 50 years prior was attacked by riot police in downtown Prague. 15,000 students, young people, and activists had gathered wearing the tricolor, the colors of the Czech flag, red, white, and blue, and carried candles and white carnations. The attack sparked off a wave of protests and demonstrations that led to the rapid toppling of the communist government. This image here is a memorial of the student demonstration, which is located where the attack happened in downtown Prague. Days later, signatory Václav Havel met with fellow Charter and Underground members to create an official opposition to the Communist Party called the Civic Forum. Their foundation was based similar to the charter, and they issued specific demands that the party had to comply to: the resignation of the current communist Czech president, the removal of the Communist Party leader, and an investigation into the police actions on November 17th, since that demonstration was legal and previously approved by the party. With the charter having more than 20,000 signatures and representatives at the point, and many citizens demonstrating in the streets, the party knew that the charter and the civic forum had more support than they did. The party leader and the president resigned, and on December 29, 1989, Václav Havel was elected the 9th president of the new democratic Czechoslovakia. While Charter 77 is not active today, it had a significant impact on the Czech life for the 13 years it served the people. The creators and supporters of the charter faced immense backlash from the party, but praise from the people. The repression of rock music, the arrest of the plastic people, and the concept of freedom and democracy really pushed for the development of the charter in 1977, and ultimately led to the Velvet Revolution in 1989. Czechoslovakia had been prosperous since the revolution. With Havel in charge of a democratic government, people, art, and music were starting to come back out into the public eye. In June of 1992, a referendum was held to determine the future of the country in terms of unity, and the people voted to separate for the final time. As of January 1, 1993, Czechoslovakia ceased to exist, and the Czech Republic and Slovakia announced independent and democratic governments. In 2004, both the Czech Republic and Slovakia joined the European Union, but only Slovakia adopted the euro currency in 2009. I want to leave you with a final image to show you how important music was to the people. In 1990, when the government was officially democratic and Havel was president, he sponsored a concert with the Rolling Stones, a very popular band to the Czechs. And in 1997, he brought the Plastic People back on stage to honor the 20-year anniversary of the creation of Charter 77. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.